the President of the United States.
One of the impressive things that I've seen as I've traveled across the country have been employers who have gone to great pains to bring into their establishments disabled men and women who then are able to make a life not by supporting, not because of the support of others, but by their own efforts, which have contributed to their rehabilitation. And to organize labor in this country, the AFL-CIO, who have worked with the unions, encouraging the unions to bring men and women in, make it easy for them to be hired. And I'm hopeful that people all across the country in the next year will make a special effort to bring into their lives in one way or another, by assisting, by hiring, by working with men and women who are handicapped, either physically handicapped or mentally handicapped. I want to congratulate all of you who are doing something about it, not merely talking about it. So this effort, which we're all making, from in the government, in the cities, in the states, in the employers, in the unions, this great cooperative effort to make a part of our community, a part of our country, a part of our lives for those who have been less fortunate, is deserving of the best you have. Thank you very much.
This begins the story of a meeting on a vital matter. It is happening now, today, in hundreds of plants across America. It can be happening tomorrow, once you have seen this film. It's a small meeting. It does not take many people to plan a program for hiring the handicapped. Those most likely to be involved at any plant or company, large or small, are first, of course, the personnel manager.
Oh, sure, Jock. Come on in.
The local union representative. Knowing the working force intimately, he can make an important contribution toward acceptance of the disabled worker. And a member of a rehabilitation, placement, or employment service of the community who can evaluate their capabilities.
Mrs. Coleman, this is Jock Gallagher. Jock, Mrs. Coleman.
How do you do? We were so glad to get your company's inquiry about the possibility of using some of our handicapped people in your plant. Now, where would you like to begin?
Well, first, I suppose, with finding out what kind of handicapped people we're talking about. As Jock knows, we have over 30 different job specs here, and the idea of revising them to include a lot of different disabilities, well, it kind of throws me.
You don't have to. Hiring the handicapped reverses the usual process of matching the job to the worker. We're not starting with a job and looking for a person who can handle it. We're starting with an individual and trying to find a job he can handle. Selective placement, if you want to give it a name.
Yes, I see. But don't some jobs require everything the human body can do?
Well, does yours? I imagine in your job you have to write, use the phone, walk around, talk to people. But couldn't you do all that with a bad back?
I do it with a bad back.
So you see, all of us are handicapped for some things. I couldn't be a fashion model, and you probably couldn't make it as an astronaut. But we don't have to go that far afield. Think of some of the jobs right here. What do they really take? What about your girl at the switchboard?
Well, that takes hearing, of course, voice, use of the hands and arms, dexterity. But then she doesn't have to move around or lift anything.
Oh, no, wait a minute. Out in the plant, we make up a line of complicated wiring harnesses. Now, those girls have to be good with their hands, too. They have to have good eyesight. They work on a color-coded setup, so they can't be colorblind. But they could be deaf or in a wheelchair. And they can have a bad back, too.
That's exactly the point. Because it's not important what they don't have that the job doesn't need. What is important is that they have what it takes for the job they're doing.
The next question, I guess, is how do we find out what an individual can do?
Well, we use this physical capacities form, which I want to show you, which gives a complete medical evaluation of the individual.
Medical? Who makes this up?
A doctor, usually.
No, I'm not going to have to be surrounded by doctors, Emma. We don't have a medical department here, you know.
No, all this is done earlier by a person's own doctor, or in some cases by our agencies. What we're talking about is a person at the point of capability, out of rehabilitation, ready for work. Now, in this hypothetical case, we give you a complete rundown of what he can or can't do in terms of physical activity, or what he can or can't have in the way of environmental factors. The blank space means he has full capacity. A check mark in the no column means he has no capacity. A check mark in the limited column means he has partial capacity. And if there are any special details, they're listed here, too.
You know, there's more information here about the capability of a handicapped person than I usually get from a normal job seeker.
Oh, much more. The handicapped job seeker is not an unknown quantity. We know and he knows how far he can go. The unknown for him is, where's the job?
Then the next step is relating his abilities to a specific job?
We try to make that easy, too. On this physical demands form, the employer can evaluate a specific job in the same way we can evaluate a specific handicapped worker. I filled out some of this to give you an idea.
Walking, jumping. Oh, so this does on paper what we were saying just a few minutes ago.
That's right. In other words, just what does it take to do the job? Now, if your people fill this out and I fill this out, then it's a matter of matching them up.
That's right.
What about training and experience?
Well, part of our job is evaluating. We're assuming now that the person is qualified to do the job he's being considered for and already has the experience. Often his rehabilitation training has been in certain fields and his work has been evaluated. Or he may show capabilities for a certain kind of work and be ready for the same kind of on-the-job training you'd give a non-handicapped worker. An employer can always check the local employment service to see what kind of training the applicant has had.
I'd like to ask what kind of special handling a handicapped worker takes on the job.
None. Not in the way I think you mean it. We're not concerned with charity here or pity or anything like that. We're talking about people who have to measure up to the same competitive standards as everyone else. They're part of the working force, and they work full-time with no special handling and no special privileges. Of course, there are some minor changes and modifications that might make things easier for certain handicapped people. They might start off 5 minutes early in the morning and leave 5 minutes earlier to avoid the rush. Or for people in wheelchairs, for instance, a simple ramp can be installed where there are steps. Or a stool might be added to what is usually a stand-up job for persons unable to stand by themselves. Tools or pots can be brought closer to the work area than usually necessary.
It doesn't sound like very much. Does it to you, Jock?
No trouble that I can see.
Since there are no special privileges, the handicapped individual knows that he has to have what it takes in a competitive world. Very often the workers around him think he has to be handled with kid gloves at first. But being accepted as someone pulling his own weight is very, very important to the handicapped worker. So you see, Mr. Gallagher, you're in the position to be the key to success at the very start.
How about it, Jock? If we hire a handicapped worker, do you see any problems?
Problems? No, none that I can see now. As a matter of fact, this might answer your question. This is a letter to all of the locals from the head of our union, Gordon M. Freeman. He's the president of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Now, he says, I am proud to represent the AFL.
I am proud to represent the AFL-CIO as vice chairman of the President's Committee on Employment of the Handicapped. In that capacity, I am calling on all the 60,000 local unions in the ranks of the AFL-CIO to take part in this effort and to encourage the formation of more union management committees for the handicapped at the plant level. For one of the strongest support a handicapped worker can have is the help and understanding of his fellow workers in organized labor. We know that the handicapped person given this help will eagerly take full advantage of the opportunity to become an active and productive worker.
So I can't see any problem as long as the handicapped worker is introduced right. And I can make sure of that.
Fine. Now, what comes next?
Well, you can see that proper placement is the key to the whole thing. But the only proof we can ever have that the placement is proper is to follow up.
You mean put him on a sort of breaking-in period?
That's right. Try it out. Check out his performance and progress on the job. After that's over, and as you said, he's got what it takes.
Then he's on his own, like everybody else.
That's it. It's not really a very complicated thing. And when we speak of the handicapped worker, remember, we're not always talking of severe and obvious disabilities. Many, if not most, handicaps are non-apparent. Deafness, for instance. Heart conditions.
Weak backs.
Poor eyesight.
Well, even the emotionally handicapped are just as valuable workers as anyone else when selectively placed in jobs with the right environment for them.
Well, Mrs. Goldman, when do we get down to cases?
Well, you might want to start right here. I'm afraid that hypothetical case I told you about wasn't hypothetical. I just didn't fill in the name.
Oh, it isn't? Oh, well, arthritis. Toolmaker.
The steps are simple. Determine the worker's physical abilities. Determine the job's physical demands. Minor modifications can be made on the job. Training can be given the individual. When man and job are matched, allow time for a tryout period. When it's clear the worker has what it takes to do the job, treat him as anybody else on the job, as part of the workforce, because that's what he is. Mr. George Meany, President, AFL-CIO.
The American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations is deeply committed to the principle of equal opportunity. We believe every worker has a right to the kind of job he can adequately fill. That principle applies, of course, to the handicapped worker. He has the same right to be judged solely on the grounds of what he can do. His ability, not his disability, is what counts. The labor movement has taken a leading part in helping to expand rehabilitation and training services for the handicapped. But this is only a first step. The decisive point is that handicapped workers must have a chance to use the skills they have. As this film has shown, the opportunities can be found if both labor and management have the will to find them. Great progress has been made in this direction, and we hope the pace can be stepped up in the future. All the handicapped worker asks is a fair chance. We will continue to do our utmost to see to it that he gets it.